Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Capitalist Cast. Apologize for the fake delays or some technical difficulties. Joining me today is PA Treasurer-Elect Stacy Garrity. Stacy, you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Leo. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. For people who aren't familiar with you, I mean, well, you're the Treasurer-Elect. But before we get into what that entails, what can you give us a little bit of information about your personal background? You have a pretty remarkable story, so I'd like to kind of let people hear about that.
Oh, sure. So I did spend 30 years in the United States Army Reserves. I'm an MP, military police, which means I'll be good at protecting your money. But at any rate, I had 3 combat deployments, all to Iraq. My last one was in 2008-2009 when I was acting battalion commander at Camp Bucca, which is in southern Iraq. And our mission was to provide care and custody for over 7,000 detainees. I had 1,200 soldiers under my command, and we were the first internment facility to have 0 abuse allegations and 0 escape attempts. In the private sector, I've spent almost 34 years working at the largest tungsten smelter in the Western world, Global Tungsten and Powders, right in Towanda, Pennsylvania, which is amazing, being in such a rural area that we have such a huge smelting operation. But in that function, I started out actually in finance, worked my way up to become the first female vice president of the company, and have done pushed a number of legislative issues. One I called "Don't Buy from the Bad Guys," and that was in the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. We used to incorporate Chinese tungsten into our DoD munitions. So now we no longer incorporate tungsten from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran into our DoD munitions, which is why I call it "Don't Buy from the Bad Guys." So what that did was it helped jobs, and it really helped support the U.S. industrial base of jobs, keeping jobs here in the United States, particularly in Pennsylvania, and supporting our industrial base is a real passion of mine.
Very cool. We were looking at the information about the Treasurer's office, and I don't know if you realize it or not, but you're the first elected Republican in over 2 decades. 1997 was the last time a Republican was elected, and she actually switched to become a Democrat in fairly short order. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just phenomenal to have, someone from a different party in the position. So can you just explain a little bit about what the Office of the Treasurer does? Because a lot of people aren't really familiar with it. It's just kind of a, that office, you just push the button on the screen or you fill in the circle, but people don't really have a good understanding of what the Treasurer really does.
Sure. So basically, you're overseeing $120 billion of public monies that we have in the state's coffers. So also managing programs like unclaimed property, all of our savings programs, which help all of our Pennsylvanians, like the tuition assistance program. We call that the Keystone Scholars. The ABLE, which allows people with disabilities basically to be able to invest their money. Let's see, we sit on like 18 different boards, including, very important, the pension boards. As we know, they're severely underfunded. So basically, you really have an opportunity to do a lot of things to improve Pennsylvanians' lives.
Yeah, I mean, the number of, other than, writing a check and sending it in to pay your taxes, the Treasury Department is really involved in a lot of different things. I mean, at the end of the day, if the Pennsylvania government is, spending money, that's coming through your office.
Yes, we sign every check.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just the billions of dollars that you're responsible for overseeing is it's just mind-blowing. So when you take a look at the Office of the Treasurer, what kind of role does that have? I mean, there's a lot of criticism about, the governor and from a whole variety of reasons. So what are some of the ways that the the office of the treasurer, kind of engages in oversight over spending and things like that.
Right. So one important function is there's a 5-day pre-audit window before you sign any check, basically. And so that's an opportunity to make sure, was it appropriated? Is it a duplicate payment? Should we actually be authorizing it? And so obviously if it's a legitimate invoice, we were obligated to pay it, but that pre-audit oversight function, I think we could do a lot more with. For example, between October and March, they stopped $36 million in fraudulent payments. And so I think there's an opportunity to do a little bit more, almost make it like a mini auditor general function. So I'm very excited about that. Also, I really want to push to lower investment fees for our pensions. So of course, I just have a seat at the table there, but there's a lot of opportunity to use the bully pulpit, which obviously none of the row offices have done to this point, and that's because they've all been part of the same party. And as you stated, well, you didn't state this, but interesting, this will be the first time since 1956 that we have a Republican Auditor General and a Republican Treasurer. The other thing I want to do is we need to stop our government from spending money that wasn't appropriated. And I'm still wrapping my arms around that one and working with the staff to figure out, how we can do that. It seems that there's some loopholes that allow this to happen. So we need to look at working with the legislature to get that stopped.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize this is something that we've talked about on CAPS, our blog and everything like that. What ends up happening is there's kind of the official appropriations, the budget that goes through that says here's how you can spend the money. But what's happened, pretty much every year since Governor Wolf has gone into office is he's overspent, money from the previous year, and then the General Assembly comes back in and backfills it.
Exactly.
So you're working with your staff to take a look at what are some things that can be done about that. Are there any other, are there any other issues that you're looking at that are just kind of interesting or that can really impact what, how money is spent in the Commonwealth?
Yeah, one thing I ran on was transparency and taking it to the next level. So it's pretty simple that Pennsylvanians deserve total transparency, and so when a check is issued from Treasury, I think the public has the right to know about it, and elected officials have an obligation to disclose it. So we would call that the open checkbook. So other states do it, we don't. We're looking to see if we need legislation passed to allow us to do that. And I think there could be possibly some pushback from both sides. But I think that is that's very interesting. And that's something that we're definitely looking at. Another thing that I think is really interesting is there's millions of Pennsylvanians that when they retire, they're not going to have enough money to live on. So they have no retirement savings. And this is, predominantly smaller businesses. So we want to look at a way, how can we help Pennsylvanians with retirement? And this might be, incentivizing small businesses to offer a payroll deduction, and then Treasury can manage those investments. But, we'd really have to promote it. But if people could retire and even have, $50,000, that would do a lot to help Pennsylvanians and the Commonwealth.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that this would be that it would be like a voluntary opt-in kind of thing and not a mandatory.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, when they presented it to me, actually they presented it as mandatory, and I said, well, Republicans don't like to mandate anything on small businesses. We like less government, but there should be a way. I've been thinking a lot about it. A way to incentivize small businesses to voluntarily opt in. So I'm trying to think of a creative way to do that. So it's not a mandate, but it's something that we do to help, because if it's just, we could do it on the Treasury website, but how are you going to get people to really do it? It's, it's much easier if you just have a payroll deduction, you forget about it. And, but I think that would be really a benefit to a lot of Pennsylvanians and to the Commonwealth itself, because we are the ones that would, be paying.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. Certainly, it's worth exploring, because if the Treasury Department has the ability, I mean, you're already in the people are already giving money to the Treasury Department. The through their payroll deductions and everything. So just adding another line item certainly would make sense. But I guess that kind of brings us back. You had mentioned the fees that we're paying on our investments and everything like that. Is that limited to just the state employee retirement system and the retirement systems in general, or are we paying management fees on a whole host of other accounts? What does that look like?
The other accounts are actually moving in the right direction. They're more and more indexed, so they're continually reducing the investment fees. So I'm very happy to see how that's going. But these retirements, we're paying a lot of fees. I mean, a lot. And so we looked at one of the Treasury funds versus the pension fund, and the Treasury had outperformed on a 1, 3, and 5 year basis. And that's with taking a more indexed approach, particularly in the last couple of years. So, it's difficult to make changes in these pension systems, but that's one thing that I really think needs some attention. And I think the timing is good. In the middle of a pandemic, I mean, I think we have to be more critical thinking of all these areas.
Yeah, it's interesting because you referenced indexed investments. Pennsylvania has historically done a lot of investing in private equity, as well as other more exotic investment categories. And what people don't think about is when you're doing these active investment management, you have to pay someone to do it.
Exactly.
So when you take a look at all of the different funds that you guys are managing, how much money does that actually, what does that look like in terms of estimated savings, or what do you think that's going to look like in terms of benefits to taxpayers?
Well, just on the pension boards themselves. Oh, I'm sorry, Leo, that's my cat.
That's okay. I have cats too.
Yeah, 4 cats running around. So at any rate, I think in one of the pension boards, it's like they're paying fees of $800 million. I mean, a huge amount, where if you just take basically your savings and just reinvest it instead of paying these huge private equity fees, I think we would see really the amount that's underfunded drastically come down. I don't have a white paper on it yet. I mean, basically the last few weeks I've been, basically just having in-depth briefings with all the senior staff people at the treasurer's office. And then I've had some deep dives into the fraud that happened in unemployment compensation, the plan to come back to work and things like that. Oh my gosh. Hang on.
Well, while Stacy's taking care of her cat field, that's okay. I actually just got my laptop is angry at me because I forgot to plug it in. So just bear with me 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No.
So when we talk about the office of the treasurer, we have a whole variety of ways that you're involved with not only spending money, but potentials for savings. One of the things you and I we had a chance to have a conversation, and you had mentioned that there's actually a policy office in the Treasury Department, and I found that to be kind of fascinating. what is that? Could you explain to viewers a little bit about, some of the different things that are in the Treasury's office? I mean, you have a policy department and you have just a whole bunch of other areas, within the department that people don't even generally think about.
Right. So we have a comptroller's office. Okay. So we have a chief investment officer, and he would be the one that actually to look at management of the fees, where we're investing, those things. We have 18 different boards that we sit on. There's an unclaimed property department. There is actually a division of the unemployment compensation. There's a department that looks basically at this the oversight, which is like 55 people, and that's where I call it like a mini auditor general. Then when you talk about policy, they have about 25 policies that they flag on these where we want to know what the policies are as far as, and this is going to be changed, by the way, firearms, green energy, things like that are pretty, more far left leaning than of course, I am ideologically. So they flag the companies that we invest in, what their policies are in some of these areas. So I haven't gotten all the 25 positions, but I'm sure we'll have to look to have some changes with that as well, for sure.
Yeah.
There's about 320 people, Leo.
How many?
About 320 people are in the Treasury.
And that's across everything?
The Treasurer's office, yeah, that's for everything. So that's going to be from unemployment to unclaimed property to management of the savings programs to the Comptroller's office, so you name it. And we have one satellite office in Scranton, which is largely unclaimed property. We used to have an office in Pittsburgh that we closed, and we have office space in Philadelphia that we're going to look to see if we can get out of that lease. But when you talk about 320 people, it sounds like a lot, but it's the lowest that it's ever been. When you look at the employees, they gave me like a 10-year window, and it's consistently gone down, through attrition, through automation, through just doing things smarter.
Okay. You brought up unemployment. We've seen a lot of problems with people actually getting their unemployment compensation checks, throughout the pandemic. What is the Treasurer's office role, as it relates to the unemployment compensation system? Is it just like oversight, or what do you do in relation to that?
So largely it's run by labor and industry.
Right.
And then the Treasurer's office obviously cuts the checks. So what had happened with some of the fraud was this happened because typically we're not paying the unemployment compensation to your 1099ers or the folks that you're not on an employer's payroll. And
right.
So what happened was, and I'm so glad that we are, because these folks were also hurt through nothing that they did, no fault of their own. So what happened was labor and industry, at first, it required an ID. And so because they were really anxious to help Pennsylvanians. And so what happened was there was a lot of identity theft, fraud. And so finally the Treasurer's office said, hey, we're not signing any more of these checks until you put an ID requirement in. So now they do. So that should take care of most of it. What's also interesting is, that through whatever reason, there's still people that have waited to get their UC checks, their unemployment compensation checks. And so the Treasurer's office, instead of furloughing, they repurposed, I think it was about 20 people to help with call centers to try and resolve the outstanding issues as to why people weren't getting their unemployment checks.
And do you think, is that something that's going to need to continue, or are we kind of getting towards the end of the kind of the backlog?
It's going to continue for some period of time, I do believe. I mean, they're going to have to make some IT improvements really in that system when things settle down a little bit. But the next big issue is going to be the people. Now, a lot of people have returned those, the debit cards.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they showed me like 3 bins of just, honest people that returned the money that they never applied for. So what's going to happen is, and there's still a lot to collect, by the way, but what's going to happen is people are going to, they're going to get a 1099 to pay taxes on this money. And so that's going to cause another issue that we're going to have to work through.
Sounds like it's going to be an interesting first couple of months, because we have the taxes are, I mean, obviously has to be the busiest time of the year for you guys.
Well, that and also the budget hearings start in February. And of course, when the budget hearings start, I'll be in office like less than a month. So I'm really working hard to, get up to speed so that I can hit the ground running, because that will be basically my first debut as the treasurer.
Yeah, and you have, I mean, there's a lot of positions, obviously, that get the lion's share of attention. People really understand, oh, well, the governor, the lieutenant governor, a little less so. But, beyond that, these row offices like the treasurer, the auditor general, the attorney general tends to get the lion's share of attention. But the treasurer's office, as well as the auditor general, really have an important role in the oversight process.
Absolutely.
So when you take a look at, the being sworn in and everything like that, what are you doing? People are aware, they hear, oh, transition teams and that kind of stuff. What are you doing? What does your day look like now in order to prepare to hit the ground running, the day after your inauguration?
Right. So we have a transition team, and I think there's going to be a press release that goes out on that probably tomorrow. And a lot of it is largely ceremonial, but there are also some key advisors to help with the ceremony, to help, get me up to speed on, some of the financial tools. But largely what I've been doing is having these in-depth briefings with the senior staff in the current treasurer's office, seeing, who's retiring, who needs to be replaced. The last 2 days, last Thursday, Friday, and this morning, right before I got on your show, we were doing interviews for the policy director, as well as the communications director. And cat. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
So largely, and then I mentioned they're doing more in-depth briefings. We had an in-depth briefing just on the budget process, and it's amazing. They prepare like binders of information. And so what they're doing is, instead of waiting till I get there and handing me this huge binder of information, which is nicely tabbed, and it's basically Treasury 101, they're going to piecemeal that to me so that I can digest it over the holidays and before the swearing-in ceremony, which will be extremely helpful.
What's been the most surprising thing that you've kind of run into so far?
I don't know if it's surprising, but just the number of people that work in that office that have such a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge. I mean, I knew it was fairly apolitical, but and these people love working in Treasury. They love their jobs because they want to help Pennsylvanians. And so there's really some good people. Like, for example, the department working on savings programs, the Comptroller, the operations, the cash management. These folks that truly are apolitical, just really come to work. Well, not come to work now, because now they're working virtually, but just, the IT department. He's a genius. That just absolutely love their positions. And also just working remotely, they've actually been more productive. which I believe, because in my, my global tungsten and powders, we've had the same situation, and people working from home are as productive or more productive. But I think that's going to give us an opportunity to hire more geographically. So I'd say they already have some diversity because they have somebody from Bradford County, me. And people don't even know where Bradford County is unless you hunt for deer. But at any rate, I think that'll give an opportunity to maybe hire some really good people that are more, in more of the rural areas.
Very cool. Well, we try and keep this under a half hour. We're at about 25 minutes. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
Oh gosh. I don't think so. I'm just, I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. I am honored to have been elected as the next, Pennsylvania State Treasurer. I will work. I will work very, very hard to bring transparency to the office, to do what I can to make Pennsylvanians' lives better. Yeah, you can count on me, guys. I also want to wish your viewers a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday Season. I hope, I know it's going to be a different, different holiday for everybody. And, I hope that they can still spend some time with family via Zoom or whatever they have to do. But yeah, I hope everybody has a safe and very Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you very much for taking time out of what has to be a very busy schedule to come on and chat with us today.
I was very happy to do it.
Well, once you get settled into office, we're definitely going to want to have you come in. I would love to hear, some of the stuff that you find as you're going through your binders of budgets. So,
I'm going to find a lot. So yes, I need to come back on.
Thank you very much, and you have a Merry Christmas as well and a Happy New Year, Stacy.
Thank you, Leo, and thanks for having me again.
Absolutely, and thanks everybody for tuning in today. And you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year as well, and be safe. Planning on coming on next week, and we're actually going to do more like a Q&A kind of thing with frequently asked questions from people who want to understand Pennsylvania government a little bit better. So thank you very much again, Stacy, our PA Treasurer-Elect, and everybody just enjoy the rest of your week.